Welcome to another episode of the Arise podcast. I'm here with my guest, Katie McLaughlin. She is a anxiety therapist based out of Ohio. She also is an amazing person. She has some meditations on YouTube. She also has you have a podcast yourself, right? Or you participate in one?
I do. Yeah, I kind of put my content, I guess, up in a couple different places. But yeah, the podcast is Mindful Moments. That's all meditations, and different mindfulness exercises. And then on YouTube, those are there as well. But there's additional education and stuff there too.
Okay, awesome, awesome. Now, I want to thank you for coming on to the Arise podcast.
Thanks for having me. I'm excited to have the conversation.
Yep. So you specialize in anxiety and mental health. Just kind of get to know a little bit more about you. What inspired you to become a therapist?
I was actually just thinking about this earlier today. It was definitely more of a calling than it was a decision. Like going into the field of therapy, I went through, of course, as we all do, my own stuff, a lot of anxiety, depression. There was probably some OCD going on as well through just, those adolescent years are really challenging. And so, you get through these things and you find things that help. And I got to the end of my senior year of college and I was like, what am I doing? What are we going to do for a career? And I was sitting on this bench and I just really felt God talking to me of like, let's use your experience and you can help people through it the way that I did. And so I was like, that's terrifying, but okay, like let's go for it. So I took a gap year because didn't really have time to apply to grad schools my senior year and get in the next academic year. So I took a gap year and applied for grad schools and fell in love with a program here in Cincinnati called at Xavier University, and it just was a really good fit.
Awesome. And I like the fact that you have, like people say, like some skin in the game, so you kind of understand what it is to kind of go through some of these struggles. I know with me personally, I've dealt with anxiety, OCD. I've been quite an overthinker my whole life. So, what struggles really did you have to work with? And have you attended therapy before being a therapist?
I did attend therapy for a short time. And it's interesting. Like I think I could have done a little bit more of finding the right fit therapist, but I was young and I was like, this doesn't really feel like it's jiving with me. And so I relied a lot more on my faith and like learning what I did through just, I have an undergrad in psychology, I have a master's in clinical mental health counseling, and using what I learned and really implementing it. Research is telling us that these things help. So let's trust the process and trust the research. And that's what I did in my own life. And it's really paid off.
Awesome. Yeah, and I think there's a lot of people struggling out there with anxiety, and I think there's a little bit of there's like a hesitation. Like I know I have friends of mine that have asked me ever since I started therapy, like, "Hey, does it work? Is it like?" They kind of think that it's there's a lot of misconceptions, a lot of big misunderstandings. I'm trying to build awareness through this podcast, but how do you think we can like, I guess, spread more mental health awareness, and what are some misunderstandings that you see out there that maybe people should look at a little bit different?
As far as mental health goes, or therapy, or kind of both in general.
Yeah, yeah, kind of both.
Yeah, and it's so interesting because therapy is ultimately just supposed to be this space where we get to walk into this room or, log on if it's virtual and you have this like super safe space to open up and to talk about things that maybe you've never talked about before. And we know that if we don't process through these things, they just stay stuck in our body. That leads to a whole host of things. And so having this opportunity to talk about the things that we've gone through in a space that provides no judgment and really just this unconditional love and compassion. There's just so many benefits. I can't count them all. And so it's so interesting to me that there is this hesitation to therapy because that's ultimately what therapy is. It's a safe space to be able to process and explore life and who you want to be and all of these things, as well as learn to manage these different challenges through anxiety, depression, whatever, diagnoses may be present. I don't necessarily enjoy using labels, but they can be helpful at times to
Me
describe
neither.
our experiences. And yeah, so it's just a really helpful space. And so it is interesting that there is such a hesitation. But I think the biggest misconception that I see and that I hear a lot in my office is I think that like I'm coming to therapy and like therapy itself is the fix, right? Like I'm going to attend like 1 to 3 sessions and not necessarily put in like the work outside of it. And like things will be so much better. And things can improve through having those conversations and getting that space to process. And we're probably not going to see the results or the outcome or the benefits to their full potential if we're not also doing the work outside of it. And so I think that's a really big misconception too.
Yeah, and I think that's with a lot of things in life, and we live in an instant gratification world.
Yeah,
I signed up for a g I signed up for a new gym in January, and I haven't been as consistent as I've been wanting to, but it's kinda like that thing, you go for 3 days and then you get mad that you don't see the results. I think
yeah,
mental health, it takes even longer because it's so complex. People have different traumas, and there's things that you've been carrying your whole life, and, you can't expect ultimate healing in a couple sessions, you know?
absolutely. It takes time to rewire your brain.
Exactly, exactly. And I love what you said. I actually wasn't expecting that. You said that because I'm not a big fan of labels as well. I feel like there's a label for everything nowadays, but I think that we're all humans and we all go through experiences and we get anxious about stuff and we get sad. And I think that just kind of normalizing those emotions and realizing that therapy is just a place to process those things. I know with my therapist, I think that's the I don't think there's any other place that I feel, I mean, other than like church and stuff, but I don't think there's any other place that I feel so heard, non-judged. Like you're just there and this person's there with, empathy. So I think just from that perspective, I think it's beneficial.
Yeah, absolutely. And just like you said, like these are all human experiences, right? And some are super unpleasant and some are more pleasant and they provide their challenges, but these don't have to be labels that we carry with us throughout the rest of our life because our brain can change and it can adapt and learn new patterns. Like we don't have to stay stuck in those places if we don't want to. And so to know that there is hope of finding peace or whatever we're looking for, we can get there. Part of it's a little bit of a decision, allowing ourselves to move out of that familiar. If it's familiar, it doesn't feel great, but it is familiar, and so it can be scary to move out of that sometimes, even if it's towards some hope.
And like going through your Instagram page, I've seen that you definitely, I would say, specialize in anxiety. Is that safe to say?
Yeah, for
Yeah.
sure.
So talking about, the normal human emotions, I think anxiety is something that I'm very familiar with. And I think in today's world, I think more than ever, people are feeling more anxious. So just for the average person listening to the podcast or someone that's really struggling, what do you recommend is those first tiny baby steps? I know ultimately, depending on the situation, things are a little bit more complex. What do you think is like that first, second, third step for someone that is realizing that pattern in their life? Like, hey, I'm definitely functioning out of anxiety 24/7. What are some of those baby steps that you would recommend?
First and foremost, I think being able to recognize what, or even just learn really what anxiety is, because it obviously is one of those that doesn't feel super pleasant. And we often want to just like avoid it or totally get rid of it. I don't know, it can feel like I'm feeling anxious. And so something must be terrible. Like we have to fix it immediately. There's that urgency. But anxiety at its core is our body's incredible protective mechanism. And once we can start to have a different relationship with anxiety itself, so many things can change. Typically in therapy, the first thing I do with clients is educate on that or review that education if they haven't been through it before. It's actually pretty mind blowing how many people I've talked to who have been in therapy for, a number of times and there hasn't been that discussion of what is going on in your brain, what is going on in the nervous system, like what is anxiety, and to be able to start to unravel that and uncover it, I think is the like one of the simplest first steps that we can take that has such an impact, much more than we might give it credit for.
Yeah, because I think when you start to learn about it, like, because I think when you're going through it, you don't really, like you said, it's everything's kind of like urgent and panicky, and you don't know what's going on. But when you
Yeah.
start learning the science behind it, like, oh, I'm scared because of this. my amygdala is acting up, you know?
Yeah,
So you start kind of normalizing these experiences, and by you understanding how your brain works, how anxiety works, kind of like you're able to get out of the, like kind of like the Chinese finger trap, right? We kind of
yeah.
struggle, but with some understanding and doing things a little bit differently, and sometimes by slowing down and doing less, then we're able to kind of navigate things a little better.
Absolutely. I love that analogy too, because there's often this like very strong resistance to these experiences that are unpleasant. And when we start to go towards it a little bit, just like a Chinese finger trap, like if we can go towards it just even a little bit, there's there's some space there to work with to be able to find a little bit of relief or to break free from it. But when we resist it, it's just going to continue to, be this big thing or become an even bigger thing in our life that our body's afraid of.
Yeah. And that reminds me of one of your posts. I forgot which one it was, but I saw it. I was like, yeah, that makes a lot of sense. It was something about like fighting anxious thoughts, because anxiety, I think it starts in the mind first, and then you feel it in the body. But one thing that I struggled with was like anxious, intrusive thoughts. So thoughts that just kind of come up and cause anxiety, whether they're thoughts that go against your character, or I'll share one of them, for example. Like,
Hmm.
every time I went on a plane, I thought I was gonna die.
Sure.
Like literally, and then you're in the plane and you don't know how to kind of escape that thought, and you're just feeling anxious. And one thing that I learned in those moments is like you kind of have to come to like an acceptance. You're just like, all right, brain, well, we die, we die.
Radical acceptance. Yep.
But it's not even like so much accepting. It's kind of accepting it for what it is, where it's a fear, it's a thought, it's your brain being creative.
Yeah.
So how do we handle those thoughts? I mean, for me, it could be the plane. For some people, it could be like a trauma or something that scares them, or a what if fear. Have you seen that in your practice? And then also, w- how do you help people like kind of escape from that, or not escape, but manage that better?
Yeah, absolutely. And I first and foremost, I just want to commend you for sharing that intrusive thought because it can be very anxiety inducing to many to verbalize those thoughts because it's almost like if we verbalize it, then it's actually going to come true. So it takes a lot of courage to do that. So I really commend that. And yes, I've seen that so much in my practice work. I specialize in anxiety. I see a lot of intrusive thoughts. Everybody has intrusive thoughts, which may surprise people. We all have them to some degree. When we're looking towards more of like OCD type stuff, we respond to those thoughts as if they're real. It's called cognitive fusion. We have the thought and we immediately go, that's going to happen. And of course, that's going to increase fear, right? That's terrifying. And we can learn to defuse. So, like a lot of the practices that you might see, the meditations have cognitive diffusion. And that term might be unfamiliar, but that is this practice of saying, this is just a thought. This is a mental event. Like you said, my mind gets creative. It's just a thing that's happening in my brain. It's not a for sure that it's going to happen or come true. So to be able to, yes, that's kind of the first thing that I go through with clients and try to help people with is yes, there's that education, and then there's also seeing that our thoughts are just thoughts. We don't have to believe them. They're not for sure going to happen, and we can take some, or not take some, but we can create a little bit of distance between ourselves and the thought, even if it's like a split second of just acknowledging that's an anxious thought can do wonders.
Yeah, because I do. Back to the labels thing. I guess you can say I have OCD. I would say that I experience OCD and anxiety frequently. I would phrase it that way. After I've kind of healed a little bit and been in therapy, I've learned, kind of the concept of doing nothing with these thoughts, and creating some separation, not letting it affect your behavior. And I've also done some ERP, which is
Hmm.
scary but effective.
Yeah. Oh, that's a beautiful, yeah, to describe it.
Yeah, yeah, and it kinda ties into this podcast, because, it's all about arising over fear, and arising over these things. But one thing that I noticed before when I used to struggle with this when I wasn't educated is that anytime I would have an anxious thought or a thought that creates anxiety, I would try to push it away. And then it wouldn't go away. And then that would make me anxious. And then I was just in my head.
Yep.
Like,
Yep.
I think that's called the ironic process theory, if I'm not mistaken. Um, Tell us about that and how to I think about like my younger self and other people that are kind of in that fight with their thoughts. Obviously, tools like meditation and things like that help. But yeah, if you can just share some wisdom on that to kind of help someone out who's kind of going through that.
Yeah. Yeah, and I think that ties back a little bit to the education piece as well of just how your mind and your body are operating when we do resist our experiences. It could be intrusive thoughts, it can be memories, it can be outside experiences. If we resist it, this sends a message to our brain that says this thing is actually a threat to me. So I'm going to increase my anxiety response. I'm going to increase that protective response because we need to get out of here. So when we have that resistance, it's a promise of anxiety in the future. And that's where something like ERP comes into play, which is exposure and response prevention, because it's working with how the brain and the body are wired. So if we can sit with this experience, this discomfort, whenever we sit with discomfort for any length of time, whether it's anxiety, again, whatever the discomfort is, we are now sending the signal that, well, I can survive this. And if I can survive this, that's going to decrease the protective response in the future. And so if we can sit in it, no matter how uncomfortable it is, I know that it's worthwhile because it's going to lead to this outcome in the future. And that's what creates lasting relief, especially from anxiety.
Yeah. Yeah. I've noticed that it took me a while to kind of comprehend that because with everything, like if something bothers you physically, you just kind of push it out of the way. But with thoughts and emotions, these are not physical things. So, it's not like you can just push it away. But yeah, that's an interesting way to look at it. Is that also with your meditations? I did the one that was cognitive diffusion
Yeah.
because that just yeah, that was amazing. I think that's how I found out about you.
Okay.
And it was just I guess just pausing in those moments and not fighting anxiety and sending those signals to your brain that you're not in danger and that that you're okay.
Yeah.
How important is things like that, like breath work, regulating your nervous system, or maybe there's some other things too that help just calm the nervous system. What would you recommend to
Yeah.
people that are looking for practices that they can implement in their day?
For sure. Like making it as simple as possible. Breath work is incredible, especially if you kind of know the tricks of the trade a little bit of how your nervous system is operating. So, just to be a little bit sciencey here, when we are in an anxious state, we are in our sympathetic nervous system. But then we also have our parasympathetic nervous system, which is our rest and digest system. And we have this thing called a vagus nerve, which connects essentially from the base of our brainstem through all the main organs and muscle groups, and it allows our body and our brain to communicate when front or prefrontal cortex, which is where logic and reasoning is kind of offline. When we are in a super anxious state, we don't have access in the way that we think that we do. We can think all we want that like we're safe, we're okay, da 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 da. Those messages aren't getting through to where they need to. So, breath work is a way that we can activate or we can utilize our vagus nerve to activate, to stimulate, or I'm sorry, I'm using different words, but to activate our parasympathetic nervous system, essentially. If we can use our breath in particular ways, box breathing has a little bit of a pause that stimulates the vagus nerve, activates our parasympathetic nervous system. And that's where we feel calm, safe, secure, all of those things that we generally enjoy feeling. One of the other easy breathwork strategies to utilize is simply elongating our exhale, trying to make our exhale in particular longer than our inhale. And you might see different like counts with it, if that makes sense. Like inhale to the count of 4, exhale to the count of 8. But sometimes it can feel restrictive or even anxiety inducing in and of itself. So I like to be able to just indicate that if we could make our exhale even slightly longer, this is sending a signal of safety to the fear center in the brain. It's activating our parasympathetic nervous system that allows you to move back into that safe rest and digest state.
That's so true because I had a breathing app and it would tell me to do 4-7-8.
Mhm.
Sometimes it was like just following like something. It was kind of counterproductive because
Yeah.
like you said, I think the more natural, because maybe you need a little bit more on the exhale. Maybe you need to let go a little bit more. So
Mhm.
it's very interesting. Is that why when you take 10 deep breaths or when you finish a one of your amazing YouTube videos, is that why like like I don't know, when you're calm, everything just feels you think a lot more clearly. I guess that ties into the
Yeah.
yeah.
Yeah, it's so fascinating when you think when you just, like, look at how the brain is wired. Because if you think about it from a protective state or a protective, mechanism, if we had, angry bear in front of us, we wouldn't want to be able to think ourselves out of being like, "Oh, maybe it won't hurt us." Like, that's not advantageous for survival, but that's not typically what our anxiety is about these days, and so we think that we can think or logic our way through it, but those messages just don't get sent. So I typically tell clients, like, if we can rate our anxiety, if it's like on a scale of 0 to 10, I should say, 10 being panic, highest anxiety that we can experience, 0, no anxiety at all. If we're between 1 and 5 or 0 and 5, we can typically use those cognitive types of strategies. We can kind of like think and reframe and all of those things. But if we're like 6 to 10, we are very much in our sympathetic state, prefrontal cortex, not online. And that's where we use something called a bottom up, which is something that's what breath work is, being able to use our body to influence our mind.
Okay. So you start from like your stomach and then you kind of can you explain that? The
The
body up?
bottom up part, yeah. So a bottom up approach is really just being able to it's utilizing the body to influence the mind
Mm,
through the vagus nerve essentially. The vagus nerve allows for our body to communicate, to send signals to our brain when we can't necessarily talk our way out of whatever it might be. So you have something called a top down approach, which is a lot of the things that you might see like cognitive behavioral therapy, that's a lot of top down stuff. But bottom up is to keep it simple, like using the breath to calm the mind, if you will.
yeah, it's kind of like with CBT, cognitive is like the action. No, cognitive is the thinking, and then the behavior is the body. So it's just kind of because one influences the others. The concept is to try to focus on one, so that way it can hopefully positively influence the other.
Yeah. Yeah. It's all connected. I think we like to say like anxiety's all in our mind or whatever, but like our body and our mind are connected. It is a whole system working together. And so even, in my practice, I talk about like holistic anxiety therapy and what that entails. It's like, well, stress impacts the body, it impacts our physical health. Sleep impacts how our brain is functioning. And so being able to just consider that everything works as a system because it does. There can be other factors that may be influencing our mental health such as our sleep or our environment or our diet. Like there's so many different factors that can be playing a role that we might not be considering simply because we think it's all in our mind.
Yeah, and I think you can heal more. You can heal. Yeah, I think you can make more progress thinking of it that way because you're taking care of your system as a whole. And I think exercise. I mean, we all know the benefits of it. I saw a study. I don't know if it's true that it's just as effective as SSRIs. I think that depends on every situation. But yeah, I know there is a big difference, and with
Yeah.
the gut mind connection, like,
Yeah.
well, that's another thing I saw on your post, and as somebody who took SSRIs before, I kind of know a lot about serotonin and things like that. But it's
Hmm.
fascinating that 90% of it's made in the gut.
Yeah.
So if you could share some of your knowledge with that, and maybe what people can do with that information as far as like, because I'm sure a lot of people don't associate the gut being associated to your mental health.
For sure. Yeah. And that it ties in again to that vagus nerve too. Like there's this thing called the gut brain axis that essentially travels up your vagus nerve to where your gut and your brain can communicate. 90% of your serotonin is created in your gut. So many things within our gut are influencing our mind every single day. And it's very complex, but to keep it very simple, essentially they communicate. It's a two-way street. So if we have stress and anxiety going on, that influences the microbiome within our gut, and our microbiome influences what neurotransmitters are created, if there's brain fog, if there's not. So a decent step there, I guess, if anybody's wanting to kind of check in, is to go through and do a GI test, or find a practitioner who does something like that to just check in, because there could be something going on. Maybe there's not. But if there is, there's different supplements, probiotics, prebiotics, whatever it is, dietary changes, and pairing that with relaxation training, which is essentially having like regularly scheduled time to bring your body into that safe parasympathetic state. Both of those together will kind of help to balance out that connection, if you will, because they're always communicating, and therefore they're always influencing each other.
Yeah. And no, I think all those things add up. And I mean, there's so many things now that are coming out that are good for your mental health. I mean, there's natural herbs that are good for your mental health, I mean, so it just shows that God has given us a lot of tools that we can use. Like I started recently taking saffron,
Yeah.
and I think it's working. No, I've only taken it for about a week or two, but
Mhm.
I think it's definitely it's crazy how something natural can help.
Yeah.
A lot of people don't make that connection. And then for the parasympathetic nervous system, I've heard that term before. It's like you said, I think that it requires a daily practice of some type, right? Because it's like what you repeat will persist, right? So I think,
Yeah.
do you recommend people just start with like 10 minutes aside? Like, what would you recommend for someone who needs to be more in touch with their parasympathetic nerve?
Yeah, yeah. This is something that I take every single client through pretty much, because anxiety is the focus of my practice, and relaxation training can be wildly effective for calming our nervous system. And not only calming it, but also, like I'm sure as you've probably experienced, especially at the beginning when we're learning different skills to manage anxiety, it is so hard to remember to use them in those moments when anxiety is peaked, because we don't have access to our logic or our so we're not thinking about that in those moments. But practicing it every single day, once a day, whatever it is, and we'll get into that in a second, helps our body to learn, oh, this is what I can do. This is what can help me get to that place of calm, or of homeostasis in my body. So it helps us to remember to do those things that are helpful in the moments when we need them the most. What I typically recommend is first we just kind of like jot down, like, when are these times that you feel calm? Where are you? What are you doing? What activities can help us to get into those places? And we make this huge, like, calm list essentially. And then we look at what does realistic daily schedule look like? Because a lot of us don't have a whole lot of time, or it seems overwhelming perhaps to be like, I'm going to spend all this time to do this thing. And I already feel like I don't have time, and that's overwhelming, and it's just causing more anxiety. So, to get around that a little bit, we look at the daily schedule and we say, okay, let's look at normal routines, typically breakfast time, or like wake up, lunch, sleep. Is there any wiggle room that we can attach 5 to 10 breaths to, filling up our water, brushing our teeth? If we have like journal time, reading or prayer, whatever it is before bed. Before bed is super helpful because that just helps us to get better sleep because we're in a safe state. So can we attach just a little bit of this breath work or meditation or whatever you choose to one of these times to try and make it as simple as possible is usually where I start with folks. And that's typically has been useful in the beginning.
I love that. I love the fact that you use like wiggle room because also what I've learned about habits is that if you really want them to stick, you have to make them, I guess, realistic to fit into your day.
Yeah.
Because I've done this before where, people are trying to do a mental health overhaul, they're like, I'm gonna meditate, I'm gonna journal, I'm gonna And then you have like 10, 15 things and you don't really have it's unrealistic, right? So
Yeah.
I think having that realization where, finding little spaces to wiggle it into your day, I think that's a much more realistic and effective approach, and I
Yeah,
think
absolutely.
because doing more is not always best.
No.
So
It could just add to the stress.
exactly.
Yeah.
Um, and what do you see now in our I mean, there's so many things, but what do you see now as far as like our mental health? Things like social media, political stress. Obviously, deep breathing and things like that are going to help. But do you think that there is some benefit in maybe reducing screen time? Do you think that that's maybe playing a role into a lot of more people struggling? What are some modern day things that you're seeing that is contributing
Yeah.
to anxiety? Maybe some patients or just something that you're noticing in the
Yeah.
industry.
Yeah, and that's gosh, there's so many factors, that are playing a role today. Like, we didn't have this I didn't have social media growing up. Like, it's wild how much has changed, just in my lifetime. Like, it's crazy. I'm only, 32, whatever.
Oh, I'm the same
Yeah.
age. I
Well,
so I get it because I grew up. It's
yeah.
weird. We grew up in a really weird time because I think we've experienced probably the most change that anyone has ever experienced.
Yeah. Yeah,
I
it's
remember
so
the I
crazy to think back on childhood and, it's like, "Oh, now we have a computer, now we have a phone," but it was a flip phone, and then iPhones came out, and it's crazy to think about how much more screen time we have now, whereas, what about nature and all of these things that can be and research tells us is so grounding to us. We don't have that anymore as a part. I mean, we do, but we spend a whole lot of time on screens and getting these glimpses into other people's lives. We're always on call, so to speak, through texting and phones. Like, we're always accessible, and that was never a thing. And how invasive that can feel, especially when you just need a break. We don't have that to the same degree anymore. And yeah, I think it plays a huge role in our mental health. The comparison that happens within social media. I think it started off with the best of intentions of having connection and stuff, but it's turned into something completely different. And I think it can serve a purpose. I think it has a place. And if we find ourselves to be in a season where anxiety or comparison or whatever it is really present, I think taking a moment to just ask ourselves, is this helping me or is this hurting me right now? And even if it's not a forever thing, if it's just for like a season and then we can bring it back in little by little to see how our body's reacting to it, that can give us a lot of really good data. And sometimes we like the answer, sometimes we don't, but then we know.
Yeah, and I think with social media too, like nowadays especially if you're going there for like advice or entertainment, like whatever it is, there's so many opinions. It's just like
Yeah.
so much noise, right? And
Yes.
even though there's probably good advice and really helpful things mixed in there, I think that our brain wasn't meant to like consume so much so quickly on a daily
Yeah.
basis.
Yeah.
Like it's yeah, one literally like there's nutritional stuff that I'll hear and it's like, this food is good. And then I'll see another one, this food is bad. And I'm like, do I eat it? Do I not eat
Yeah.
it?
Is it this? You're talking about the same food.
Is it okay? Like, and then you're more confused than
Yeah.
ever, right? So I think maybe reducing screen time. I know yesterday I went to the gym and I just took 5 minutes. Not really. I don't know how to do mindfulness, and then we can get into that. But I was like, I think it's just doing nothing and just looking at nature and just being present. And I did that. And there's a beautiful lake by my house, and that was probably the most calming part of my day. So yeah, I think that really ties into that. And I want to jump
Yeah.
into mindfulness too because
Yeah.
and how important it is to get out of your mind and into the present moment. But sometimes like that concept is hard to understand for someone who's never educated themselves or has been to therapy. So if you could just, talk about what is mindfulness and
Yeah.
kind of just simplify it so anyone can start incorporating being more present in their day.
Absolutely. I love that. That's actually where I started, like, YouTube way back in the day. My first video was, like, about mindfulness, and it was super cringy, but it was just simplifying, mindfulness in general, and really all it is, um, being observant of the present moment. And that's a very general statement, but it's being observant. This could be of our thoughts, this could be of our surroundings, could be of our body. We're just picking one thing, essentially, or just like being present as much as possible with whatever this moment is offering us. And I think one of the maybe biggest barriers or misconceptions that comes with mindfulness is that we expect that when we do that, that our mind is going to be clear. That's just not how we can't just shut our mind off. And so a big part of mindfulness is, yes, we're trying to be present and we're not judging what this moment is offering, which can be a challenge, and that's part of the practice. But it's allowing our mind to continue in the background while we try really hard to focus our attention. Well, not try really hard, but continually bring our focus to whatever it is we're paying attention to. So I'm kind of going all over the place, but let's use our breath, for
That
example.
makes sense. Yeah.
Yeah, if we want to be mindful of our breath, we can sit and we can pay attention to, how does the breath feel going in and out? What does the inhale feel like? What does the exhale feel like? All of those things. What does it sound like? Just really try to pay attention to that. And then thoughts come in, and then we're like, oh man, like, what do we do now? We say, okay, I recognize that those thoughts are coming in. Maybe we recognize the content of those thoughts, maybe we don't. And then we bring our attention back to the breath. No judgment. There's no need for critical self-talk here. We're just acknowledging, okay, my mind is continuing to do its thing. It can do that. That's fine. I'm going to focus on my breath. So we continually bring that attention back as many times as the mind wanders, because I promise that it will, many, many times through practice. And that's typically the biggest barrier that I hear from clients, from anybody starting. It is like, oh, I'm so bad at mindfulness. My mind keeps running. And I'm like, you're not bad at it. Your brain is functioning just fine.
Yeah.
It's part of the practice to be able to train our mind, to train our attention to come back to the one thing that you want to focus on.
Yeah, I think that's the misconception. Like there's a misconception that it's about, clearing your mind or erasing thoughts, and you can
Yeah.
never, your brain is like a computer that never turns off. So it's not that. It's kind of
Yeah.
being, like you said, being present, being calm, fight the brain being active, and yeah, it's all relative. I know I started with a couple years back, I started with Headspace and Calm and those apps, but I learned that you could be mindful in any given moment, right? Like we're always, that's, I guess that's why it's called the present, right? It's a present that you can always go back to in times of, that you
Yeah.
need it. Awesome. And tell us a little bit more about your YouTube channel, like the type of videos that you have, where
Yeah.
people can find you on there.
Yeah. YouTube is kind of a mix, I guess, of kind of mindfulness practices and meditations, like the practical implementation. If you do want a guided version, like you just said, though, like we can definitely do that, and we can practice these things in unguided or non-guided ways by, using our senses while we're doing laundry or doing the dishes or looking at a beautiful lake or whatever it is. Like there's so many ways to bring it into daily life. You don't have to do guided versions unless that's your thing and that, you enjoy it. But there's definitely a space for both. So you have those more guided practices and then a whole lot of education, nervous system, brain, amygdala, all the things that we were talking about today, just anxiety in general. There's a lot of education there. Try to make things as simple as possible, because I think this information can really change people's lives. The educational piece, and when I first started, I was like, why? It doesn't make sense to me that it's kind of gate kept in the therapy room. Or at least that's how it felt back then. I think social media has totally changed the game with that now, because there's a ton of therapists on social media sharing all sorts of things, but it's just a different place to have education in a long format rather than these short clips of just bombarding our brain with information.
Awesome, awesome. And I like to end every podcast with the arise question. So, what is something that you have overcome, that you've arised over, and that has helped you become a better version of yourself?
Gosh, what to choose? There's so many challenges. I think So the most, I guess, recent ones that I've been dealing with in my own life. I have a 2-year-old. She's almost 2.5, and there's been a whole host of challenges with welcoming a child, you know? But I experienced a ton of postpartum anxiety and a lot of anger. And so really figuring out, taking everything that I know about anxiety and just about emotion regulation and stuff and like really hardcore implementing that in my own life to like come back to my values. And it's really difficult to do that in those moments when these emotions feel so strong and they're so heightened. And I think that was the first, probably maybe not the first, but the most recent definitely time where it's like my behaviors are not matching who I saw myself to be, and that really doesn't jive with me. And so we're trying to figure out what is going on and how can we get back to how I view myself and the values that I hold and what I want to pass down to my daughter.
Yeah, that's beautiful. And I think I feel like that a lot, right? And I think the most important thing is like you said to be aware of it and to make the appropriate changes and realize we're not perfect and have grace
Yeah.
for ourselves. I mean,
Yeah.
I don't have kids yet, but I know it's coming. I know it's gonna be a lot of work, right? I'm getting my practice with
Yeah.
2 dogs right now, but
Yeah.
being a parent is it's a struggle, but it's probably it's worth it at the end of it for rewarding, I'm sure.
Absolutely. Yeah.
Awesome, awesome, Katie. Well, hey, I want to thank you for coming on and for making this happen. Hopefully, there's some people out there that got some good information, things that they can implement. And before you go, where can people find you? I mean, I found you on YouTube, and your meditation really helped me through a stressful day. So you are making a difference, and I want people to be able to find you and find what you got going on. So, where are some places where people can explore more of your work?
So yeah, thanks for saying that. It's always so nice to hear that these practices are helping folks, and it's just incredible to me that they are doing so. So yeah, YouTube's a big place. It's Anxiety Relief with Katie on YouTube right now. I've changed the name a few times and I'm trying not to do that too much, but that's the name. My podcast is Mindful Moments, and that's all meditations. I do have a newsletter that goes out every week, and you can be added to that if you download my free Calm Guide, which is actually just taking you through the process of implementing relaxation training that we were talking about today. And I guess on Instagram as well, Cedar Rose Counseling or Cedar Rose underscore counseling. I'm on there too. A little bit less so because social media impacts me too. And so not on there a whole bunch, but I'm trying. And I think that's it. I've got a website too for my therapy practice, cedarrosecounseling.org if you're in Ohio. And yeah, that's where you can find me.
Make sure to put all the links below. Katie, thank you so much. You're amazing. I appreciate the conversation. And thank you for joining the Arise podcast.
Thanks for having me. I really appreciate it.